Thanks, Annie. Yes, Annie, I performed in Annie's piece also, which I really enjoyed. As she said, my name is Joyce Owens. At Chicago State, I'm known as Joyce Owens Anderson because I'm also married to a man whose last name is Anderson, Monroe Anderson, who's a journalist. And I have two sons who are named Anderson. So I sort of use their name on and off, but my art name is the name that I started when I first started making art when I was in school and after I was in school. So I didn't want to change my signature or my artwork, so I opted to be Joyce Owens professionally and Joyce Owens Anderson at other times. I have been teaching at Chicago State since actually the mid-90s. It was kind of a fluke. I was taking care of my sons who are now in their mid-20s, mid to sort of leaning towards late 20s. I was invited to do a solo exhibition, and because I have a degree, an MFA, I have a terminal degree in art, I said, oh, I should probably, teach one of these days, but I hadn't done anything about doing it. I was just mainly taking care of my kids and painting. So I was offered a position at Chicago State, and I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I actually really love working there. This is a 2-year college that you guys are in, and you have a college day coming up October 3rd, so that you can continue and get a 4-year degree. You guys probably know that, right? So, college night, yes. And there's a whole list of colleges and universities that are going to be coming to you to talk to you about continuing your degrees to get, a full bachelor's degree or in science or arts or whatever. And Chicago State's one of the schools that's going to come out. So if you're interested in finding out any more information about Chicago State, you can feel free to contact me, but also you're going to have a college night where you'll learn more things about a variety of schools. Are many of you actually considering careers as artists, as visual artists? Some of you are, and some of you are like some of the students that I have. I have students who are majors in criminal justice or majors in psychology and nursing and all kinds of other areas, and they want to experience visual art and they want to learn how to do some things. I think it's always very good because it helps you to understand your culture and respond to ideas in a different way than you do in many other classes where you actually write. So for me, I'm primarily a visual artist, but I also found out that I'm a writer too, and I've been writing a blog for a number of years. I call my blog kind of curmudgeonly. I really complain about what artists don't have, what artists should have, what some artists perhaps don't know. I try to explain. One of my goals, as I learn things, I realize that I would like to teach people all the things that I wish somebody had taught me when I was in school. A lot of things you can't learn in college. I mean, a lot of things you have to learn from practical experience, but I write a blog because I want to share what I know. And I have 2 blogs. I also have, as you saw, some of you saw when you first came in, I did a Google search. And you saw all the, you saw photographs of my artwork, you saw pictures of me in different situations on different blogs because of shows I've done, because maybe news articles. If you guys have seen the gallery news, Chicago Gallery News, it's a publication that has information about current exhibitions in the city. You'll see that I'm featured in an article along with other artists in the gallery news. That's okay. Thank you. We went offline.
I think the computer just decided to shut down. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to?
No, I just wanted to Google search because I wanted to skip around and show them different things. Okay, so do you know the title of this show? Does anybody know the title of this show? This show is called Found. For me, the word and the image work together to make a complete package. So for me, I start painting, I have an idea, or maybe sometimes I don't have an idea. For me, I'm interested in my materials. I like paint, I like color, I like stuff. So I walk up to a canvas and I start painting. I may not know exactly what I'm going to come out with. And as I work through it, I think. I go away from it, I come back to it, I go away from it, I come back to it. I might read something, I might think about a concept. There might be something that happens. For example, I did some pieces that maybe I can show you online that happened when there was a study repeated from the 1940s in the 2000s about a white doll and a black doll. And in the 1940s, when the African American children, young children, said that the white doll was the good doll, the white doll was the nice doll, the white doll was the pretty doll, I kind of understood it because it was before the Civil Rights Amendment was ratified in 1963. It was before, you know, Martin Luther King, was before a lot of changes in equal rights in the country. So I can understand that a child in the 40s might think that the black doll was the bad doll, the black doll was the unattractive doll. But I couldn't understand that in 2000. So as a result of that, I was so incensed by it that I made some dolls of my own that I called Girls Like Me, and they're dolls with afros and, you know, curly hair. And it was just my response to it. And so a lot of times I'm responding to political ideas, political concepts. For me, what has been a given through my life has been race. And we saw it in the 2008 election of Barack Obama. We see it now in the upcoming 2010 elections with, you know, people stating that the only thing we want to do is make sure Barack Obama is no longer the president. Now, there are certain reasons, but, you know, as we know in this country, race is a huge issue. For me, I had to deal with not only race, but also women, issues with being a woman. In the art world especially, oh, that's one of the Girls Like Me. In the art world especially, I've been involved with the Women's Caucus for the Arts and a gallery called Woman Made in Chicago and other women's organizations. I'm part of a group called Sapphire and Crystals, and it's a group of African American women artists. What we find out is that as time goes by, what we notice is that women weren't getting as many opportunities as men. Now, in the 60s, there was a movement. Artists like Faith Ringgold, like Judy Chicago. I don't know if you've heard of any of these artists in your art history classes, but Judy Chicago and Faith Ringgold and other artists who were living in New York started picketing the major museums in New York because you could look at the list of artists who were being shown and there were no women. And so eventually now there are women, and I always sort of count. I look and see how many women are in the, you know, Venice Biennale, or how many women are in the Museum of Modern Art's current exhibition group show, and how many people of color, how many Latinos, how many Asians, how many African Americans, how many whatever. Because in a society that's supposed to be equal, it's supposed to be equal opportunity for everybody. So it's not that some artists, I was in a panel at the Art Institute a couple years ago about the invisible artist. That was supposed to be artists of color. Well, I had a Chicago Reader that had an article about an artist named Al Tyler who was exhibiting at Chicago State University. So I didn't consider that invisible since his work was in the Chicago Reader, and there was an article about him. I knew I was exhibiting in many places, and I knew other artists were exhibiting in many places. So we weren't invisible, but the perception when you go to major institutions is that there are some artists who, and a lot of times it doesn't include women and minorities. So a lot of my work is in response to that sort of idea that we should not be left out. This one over here, which is called, the one with the guys in the Klan hoods and the African Americans, black and white in color. This one is called The Medieval in America. Now this one was shown first in an exhibition at the DuSable Museum. And again, I mean, I really never expected to do a painting about the Ku Klux Klan. I never expected to do a painting about lynching, because although these ideas sort of move my artwork forward, you know, these ideas about exclusion and these ideas about who's included or who's not included. I don't address them in a confrontational way, in my opinion. I try to enlighten people without slapping people in the face, I'll put it that way. But in this case, I was invited to be in an exhibition at the DuSable Museum that was specifically about lynching. The last record, you may have heard, if you heard the news today, you may have heard that the man who was accused, one of the 3 men who was accused of the last lynching on paper, which was in the, I think it was the mid-90s, there was a man who was dragged behind a truck in Texas to his death. And the man who's on death row, and I believe will be executed unless there's some last-minute stay, is the man who there are two death row issues up right now. One of them is a guy who people changed their story about him being actually the perpetrator of the crime. This other guy, and he's an African American, and so there's some question about whether he did the crime or not. And since there have been so many people whose convictions have been overturned because of DNA and other scientific methods that turns these trials around, he's had several stays of execution. But this other guy who dragged this African American man behind his truck in Texas is set to be executed, and I don't think there's going to be any stopping it. And so this show was about, this exhibition at the DuSable Museum was about that period of time which only recently ended. And so I had to do something that was a little stronger for that. So I didn't want to focus on an actual lynching, so I made the image of the lynched person a little less obvious, hopefully. But I did want to show the monsters of the people that I consider monsters who were in those white hoods, who were hiding themselves behind those hoods, but who were willing to take the lives of some people who were actually the pillars of their community. These were people who had businesses, and so if their businesses were too successful, they could possibly be lynched because they were too successful. These people weren't lynched because they had been causing trouble. They were lynched because, people just didn't want them around. So that's how that one came about, and that's why, I have the crime scene. It's a little, it's kind of in your face, but I don't think lynching is a subject that I could tiptoe around. Other ideas are about, like this one next to it on the left, that one's called a love puzzle. So you could look at that and you can come up with all kinds of ideas of what you may think it means. That one was a piece that I kept turning it around and around and around, trying to figure out which was the best way to I'm still not sure. I'm likely to change it again. But it had been vertical. It had been a vertical orientation, and then I changed it to a horizontal orientation just because it felt that it needed to change. I use collage in my works too, you may have noticed. And I try to use collage in a way that it's almost imperceptible, so that I'll paint some areas and then I'll collage some areas, but it's very hard for people to tell most of the time. Because I'm interested in the third dimension in my work, I create the illusion of 3D in my work, the way I use the paint, but sometimes I like to sort of intrude into the third dimension by adding some collage elements that actually extend from the surface of the canvas. And you'll see that in some of these over here, like this one, and especially the one in the rear.